What's up guys, welcome back to the channel, and today I'm going to be answering a question I am frequently asked, and that is how much points per game would Michael Jordan average in today's NBA? And I think that's a great question, but I've never really had an exact answer for you. And I know you guys probably see former NBA players always saying Jordan would average 50 or 60 points per game, and I do think that is a slight exaggeration, but those players, they usually never have any data or any facts or evidence to back up those claims. But that will all change today, as I have some pretty good evidence to show you guys how much Jordan would average in 2020. So before I dive into all the data and numbers, I think we need to establish three important things. Number one being that Michael Jordan, he would be great in any era, as he is one of the most skilled players the NBA has ever seen. He is also one of the best athletes, not only in NBA history, but in the history of sports. He was also one of the best finishers at the rim, one of the best mid-range shooters, and he had an unparalleled work ethic that would make him great in any era. The second thing we need to establish is that Michael Jordan, he is the greatest scorer of all time. He averaged 30.1 points per game for his career. That is the highest in NBA history. In the playoffs, he averaged 33.4 points per game, which is also the highest in NBA history. And when it came to the finals, he averaged 33.6, which is second only to Rick Barry. Jordan also has the most 50-point playoff games, as well as the most 40-point playoff games, and he has the highest scoring playoff game in NBA history with 63 points. And to add on to all that, he has 10 scoring titles, the most in NBA history, winning 7 of those consecutively. And lastly, we need to establish the defense in Jordan's era, it was flat out harder. As that era, it was just flat out more physical, the lane, it was definitely more packed, and you had more rim protectors waiting for players at the rim. There was also less space in the court and less room to operate. And having a defender who can put his hands on you and basically guide you wherever he wants, that is a huge disadvantage for a perimeter player like Michael Jordan and any player who played in the 80s, 90s, or early 2000s. So with those main three things established, I think we can finally dive in to how much Jordan would average in the modern NBA. So for Jordan's career in Chicago, he averaged 31.5 points per game, and his highest scoring season with the Bulls was 37.1 points per game in 1987. And during that year, Jordan would have 2 60-point games, 8 50-point games, and 29 40-point games, including a streak of 9 consecutive games scoring 40 or more points. And if you look at Jordan's shot breakdown, he took 27.8 field goal attempts, 27 of those shots being 2-pointers, and the remaining 0.8 being 3-point attempts, as well as 11.9 free throws. And the glaring number that really stands out is that 0.8 3-point attempts, which for today's standards is absolutely ridiculous. And if you look at the average number of 3-pointers taken in 1987, it was 4.7, compared to 2020, where it's 34.1. That is over 7.5 times as many threes taken in 2020 compared to 1987. And you've got to remember at this point in time, in 1987, the 3-point line had only been around for 8 years, and players who were Jordan's age and older didn't have a 3-point line in high school, college, or half of their NBA career. And during this era, nobody was pulling up from 40 feet like Steph Curry or taking 13 3-point attempts like James Harden. And that simply has to do with people not knowing the importance of the 3-point shot and the value it holds. So comparing 3-pointers taken in 1987 compared to 2020, it is definitely not comparable, but if you look at the pace of play, it is definitely comparable, as in 1987, the pace was 100.8 compared to 2020, where it's 100.3. Also in 1987, the average points per game for a team was 109.9 compared to 2020, which is 111.8, and those numbers once again are definitely comparable. The only huge outlier is the number of 3-pointers taken. So now that we understand the difference in eras, I think we can make a better comparison. And if you go back to Jordan's 87 season, once again, he averaged 37.1 points per game on 27 2-point attempts and 0.8 3-point attempts, and he shot 18.2% on those 3-pointers. Now, in 1987, there's a 23-year-old Michael Jordan, and I wouldn't say he was in his absolute prime. As a prime Michael Jordan from 1989 to 1983, shot 33.4% from 3 on 1.9 attempts, and his 2 best years were 1990, when he shot 37.6% from 3 on 3 attempts, and 1993, when he shot 35.2% on 2.9 attempts. So I think that is definitely a respectable 3-point percentage. But compared to the modern NBA, only averaging 2 3-point attempts, that is relatively low. So let's up the number of 3-point attempts from 2 all the way to 5. And to give you guys kind of a marker on how good a 3-point shooter I think Jordan would be, let's use Marcus Smart. And Smart, he came in the league an awful three-point shooter, as from 2016 to 2018, he only shot 28% from 3. But over these past few years, he has definitely improved his three-pointer, and now he is shooting 35.5% on 5.3 attempts. So we're going to use Marcus Smart's shooting percentages as a gauge and kind of a marker for Michael Jordan. So in 1987, Michael Jordan, he took 27.8 field goal attempts, and let's say 5 of those attempts were three-pointers, leaving us with 22.8 two-point attempts. And a prime Jordan, he shot 54% on two-point attempts, giving him 12.3 makes out of 22.8 attempts. Now, on those 5 three-point attempts, let's assume Michael Jordan shoots 35%, which, as you guys know, is extremely realistic. And shooting 35% from 3 on 5 attempts would give him 1.75 makes out of every 5 attempts. Now, let's take a look at the numbers and do some simple math. Jordan, he made 12.3 two-point attempts, 1.75 three-point attempts, and 10.2 free throws. Now, if you multiply that 12.3 by 2, it gives you 24.6, and if you multiply that 1.75 by 3, that gives you 5.3. And if you carry over that 10.2 free throws and add up all those numbers, that gives Jordan an average of 40.1. And I think that number is a great estimate of what Jordan would be able to average in the modern NBA. And if anything, I think it might be lowballing what Jordan could average, as those numbers don't take into account things like better defense, hand checking, better rim protectors, and just tons of other variables that would definitely boost Jordan's point per game average in the modern era, and I would say it would be around 41 to 43 points per game. Now, one player averaging 40 points per game for a season, that is definitely spectacular, but throughout NBA history, a player averaging that many points has never translated to any major success, and Jordan himself, he had to tone down his scoring numbers in favor of winning championships. And the absolute pinnacle of Michael Jordan, I would say, was from 1990 to 1993, where he was able to win 3 consecutive championships. And if you want to look at how much a prime Michael Jordan on a winning championship caliber team would average, I think I have a pretty good estimate of how much that would be. Now, from 1990 to 1993, Jordan, he took 23.7 shots per game. Now, let's once again assume that Jordan takes 5 3-pointers per game, and the rest of his shots are all 2-pointers. And I think if you take into account the lack of rim protection in this era, I would say Jordan, he shoots upward of 58% on 2-point attempts, which would give him 11.2 makes. And once again, if you do some simple math and multiply all these numbers, 11.1 times 2 is 22.2 points, 1.7 threes times 3 equals 5.3, and if you add in these 6.6 free throws, that gives Jordan an average of 34.1 points per game, and I think that is a pretty good estimate of what a prime Michael Jordan, whose goal was to win championships, would average in 2020. And there is no doubt in my mind that a prime Michael Jordan, he'll be able to average whatever he wanted in this era, whether that be 43 points per game or 35 points per game. He could basically get whatever he wants. And I don't want to say the modern NBA has no good defensive teams, because there are definitely a few good defensive teams, but overall, the NBA in 2020, it is definitely an offensive league with a fast tempo. And looking at Jordan from an eye test perspective, I think he would thrive on the lack of rim protection and just how easy it is to drive in the lane. And even in these 2020 playoffs, we've seen that once a player gets past the first line of defense, there is virtually no one stopping him at the rim, and most of the time it is an uncontested layup or an uncontested dunk. And once again, Jordan, being one of the most athletic players ever, he would thrive in this free-flowing era where the spacing is definitely much improved compared to the 90s or the late 80s. So that is really all I have to say about Michael Jordan and what he would average in today's NBA. I think I gave you guys some pretty good data and some pretty good evidence to back up my claims, but as always, I want to know your guys' opinion and how much do you think Michael Jordan would average in the modern NBA. As always, I'll be interested to see what you guys think, but with all this being said, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys next time.